Jesus for the cleansing power. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?
A bottle of water then too. This is preacher lubricant. About halfway through your lesson, you know, when you can't speak anymore, it's always nice to be able to wet your whistle just a little bit, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you to the congregation for the invitation for such a great theme. You know, this is a theme that every congregation needs to be dealing with often, not relating it just once a year or once every other year, but we need to be talking about evangelism and about preparing for evangelism all the time. That's why we're here. You know, we talk often about baptism and the need for baptism. We have our baptistry, but you know, there's something that every Christian shares when they're sitting in a pew, and that is they come up out of the waters of baptism. There's a reason for that. It's because we've got a work to do, and that work centers around this theme of evangelism. Years ago, when Russell and I were in Fannin County together, he was in Trenton, Texas, and I was in Leonard, Texas, and every Friday we would get together and we would come together at the nursing home there in Leonard, and we would have a devotional with those who were the residents there of the home. And we would sing with them and we'd pray with them and things. And every week there was this one lady who would come, and her name was Edna. And Edna was sitting in the chair. And it was one of those reclining chairs, and her feet were out in front of her. She didn't have a good balance. She couldn't sit up. And she was pretty much bed fast or chair fast. But she would always come and she would sing all the songs. It seemed like she knew every song. She never needed a book. But even though she never had a book, she always repeated the number. We would call out a number, 457, and she would always repeat number 457. And so we always knew what our song was going to be because she would always say it. And she was great. But at the end, we would always go around and we would greet all the residents of the home. And as you would approach Edna, there was such anticipation in her face, a desperation. Her arms were already stretched out, and she was one of those that when she locked onto you, you couldn't get away. But she was so desperate to hold on to something. She was groping for that connection. She was looking for someone to just stop and show her some compassion, just to look into her eyes and let her know that she wasn't forgotten, that she was still loved in this world. You know, in a lot of ways, the world is filled with people who are looking for that kind of contact and connection. Someone who wants someone to take the time and stop and notice them, even for just a moment. We're living in a world that is parched by loneliness, and they thirst for interaction. They're like that ostracized leper who is cast out of the community, or the woman from the well of Samaria who couldn't even gather water in her own town but had to go outside on the hillside, separated from the community. Not only were they separated from the community, but they themselves felt separated from their families and even separated from God. And there's a lot of people then who live in this way. They are separated from God, and they know there's got to be something more. They look around and they see the pain, the iniquity, the anguish of this world. They see mental disorders and physical diseases. They see how bad people can be, and they're losing faith in something greater than themselves, something greater than this world, and they're looking for just something more. There has to be something more, otherwise it's too disappointing to live here in this world. And some people just won't. And they choose exiting this life because they've not found that connection that they need. Others start looking for that connection in all the wrong places. They socialize in bars and clubs, and they surround themselves with carnality and immorality, temptation and iniquity. They give themselves to immoral sexual practices. They enter abusive relationships. They get high. They get stoned. They get strung out, looking to fill this void in their lives. Others don't turn to such carnality, but they still are looking to fill that void. They fill their lives with material things like jewelry or cars or trinket collections in their homes. Material things that aren't necessarily sinful, but, without God, they don't fill the void either. Ruth Carruth, the author of that song he just sang, poignantly asks, millions are groping without the gospel. Every time I sing that line, I see Edna. That's, when I sing songs, I get these mental pictures, and they're recurrent through the years. And when I sing that line, I always think of Edna, because that to me was one of the most exact images of groping that I've ever seen. It's just reaching, looking for something to lay her hand on. Millions are groping without the gospel. Quickly they will reach eternity's night. And shall we sit idly as they rush onward? Haste! Let us hold up Christ, the true light. From its strains echoes for us the great challenge of Christ. You shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, even unto the end of the earth. Acts 1 and verse 8. Jesus is telling us we are his witnesses. We are his hands. We are his mouth. We are his eyes that see into the lives of people who are in desperate need of salvation, who need the gospel. We are his eyes that lift him up, and we see that the fields are white unto harvest. Do not say in yourself, John 4 and verse 35, there are 4 months and then comes the harvest. Look, I tell you, lift up your eyes and see the fields are white for harvest. The time is now. And we take that challenge from Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, and we see Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria, even unto the ends of the earth, and we picture this globe, this earth. 7 billion souls, roughly, and growing. That's a lot of people. That's a lot of evangelism. How can I reach 7 billion? Bob Berard, one of my teachers in school, used to say, do you know how to eat an elephant sandwich? Not that I ever really wanted to eat an elephant sandwich, but he would ask the question. And the answer was 1 bite at a time. And the world, the uttermost parts of the world, looks like that elephant sandwich. But even Jesus in that context tells us 1 bite at a time. Where does evangelism begin? It doesn't begin in Zimbabwe or Tanzania for us. It doesn't begin in the United States. It doesn't begin in the state of Texas. It doesn't begin in Navarre County. It doesn't even begin just in Corsicana. Even that's a pretty big bite. Evangelism begins right here with me and getting myself prepared to go to my next door neighbor, to talk to the person that shares a cubicle with me at work, or the classmate just down the row or aisle in a classroom. It begins here in my heart and changing my life. We're asking the question, how are we using God's golden moments? Are we reaching out for the lost, those burdened with iniquity? Are we offering the eternal water to those who are thirsting for the eternal God? Parched in a world of woe and sorrow and depression and heartache, have we slaked their thirst on the Word of God and the grace that he offers through it? One man said, outreach is more than just the proclamation of biblical truth. Though that's an important part of the process, he said it is also about living people, serving in our community, being models of Christ's grace, building authentic friendships with those who are far from God, and telling our stories of God's presence and power. And he hits the nail on the head. The important concept, evangelism is about individuals. It's about us as people. We understand that people come to know God through us. People know God through me, Sam Dilbeck. People will come to know God through you, and you may be the only connection they'll ever have with God. So by our love, by our example, by our teaching and our action, people will experience God's love. Through our mercy, people understand God's mercy. The world is filled with Ednas who are groping and longing for Christ. They're looking for that Christian contact so that they can come to know the eternal God. And the question is, will we show them God? How do we prepare? I say all of that to introduce one aspect of the preparation. Glenn, I was thinking about this lesson. I'm thinking, well, you could talk about your study, you could talk about your prayer, you talk about all these different things, and quite frankly, you could do a lesson or two on every one of them. But I believe it begins right here with love. And so we're going to focus mostly on love this morning because it is love that kicks us out of our recliner. It is love that opens our front door and walks to the neighbor. It is love that sees the person at the gas station who is just hoping someone will give them $1 so they can buy a candy bar. It's love that walks up to them and gives them that $1. That asks them, are you Christian? It says, do you know Jesus as the Savior of your life? It's love that gets to that point. When our oldest son, he's at the University of Texas right now. When he was somewhere around 2.5 or 3 years old, Julie and I, in fact, she was pregnant with our second son at the time, but we were in the church building. We were cleaning out an old closet. You know how closets get. There's old Bible class material in there and bulletin board stuff that we couldn't throw away because we might use it again in 22 years. And so there were stacks and stacks and stacks of yellowed bulletin board props and door decorations and things, and it was just all unorganized. And we decided we're going to build some shelves in there, and we're going to lay it out flat because we still couldn't throw it away. So we had everything just right, and we're working hard. And Jason is on one of those little toddler toys, that you roll around. You could, it's not like a bicycle. You just push yourself on it, and we hear him going up and down the halls. After a while, we realize we don't hear Jason. We don't see him. And so we start calling out for him. Jason, Jason. He's not answering back. And then the panic starts to set in, he was just right here, but he's not here anymore. And so we run through the building, and he's nowhere in the building. We get to the back door, and the back door is wide open. And there's an old wheelchair ramp that went out that back door, and he would always get on it. He would go up and down that thing on that riding toy, but he's not on the ramp either. We run outside, and we're calling for him, Jason, Jason, and you're getting that pain in the pit of your stomach. And I run over and look in the yard, and we look in the house, and he's not there, and we're still calling for him, and we go around on the other side of the building, and there he was. An eternity passed in those 35 or 40 seconds where we couldn't find him. And he was in the parking lot, oblivious to any danger. Well, it's just where he plays. What's wrong with that? But ask yourself, why did we stop what we were doing to go look for him? It's because we loved him. He was our son. And we loved him, and the last thing we would want was for him to be abducted or to go out in the street on his riding toy and get run over by a car or some other thing like that. We were terrified in those moments, so we dropped everything and we searched for him. When man was lost and obscured by the filth of his own sin, oblivious to his own danger, separated from a God who had created him, God sent his own son to walk among the people. God sent Jesus to look for us, to call out to us. Sam, where are you? Why have you wandered so far away? Sam, here is the way back home. For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. Romans 5, beginning in verse 6. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us, the ungodly, the filthy, the spiritually ugly. In those days, if I could have looked into a mirror that reflected not my face but my soul, I would have been terrified, horrified at the image coming back at me. But God loved us, and he sent his Son for us, demonstrating that great love. In Luke 15, this parable of the lost, the one sheep wanders astray. He leaves the 99 and he goes and he gets it. And when he finds that sheep, he carries it back to the flock. He calls a feast with his friends. Or the woman who has lost her coin, her means of livelihood, and as soon as she realizes it is gone, Jesus says, does she not light a lamp, sweep the house, and seek diligently until she finds it? When something is important to us, when we love it, we're going to naturally search for it when it is lost. And so it is with evangelism. The greatest part about evangelism is developing a heart that sees the lost and has compassion for them. That's what we're called to do. That's how we prepare our own lives. When we develop a deep, abiding, a moving love for lost souls, we will make a diligent effort in searching for them and trying to find them. Love searches. Love motivates us to go. The love we need to evangelize really, I would say, comes in two parts. It begins with our love toward God, and then our love toward the lost. You know, when the lawyer came to Jesus and said, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus said, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. This is the primary commandment. This is the first thing we need to learn. Love God. I know in our modern society we've been told a lie, that we fall in love and we fall out of love. That love is some chemical attraction, some mysterious, nebulous idea that strikes out of the blue. But love is less about the object that's to be loved and more about the person who's doing the loving. In other words, it's not the object that is worthy of love, otherwise God would never love us. But it is about the fact that God loved in spite of all of those things. Love is a choice. And when he says, love the Lord your God, he's not saying wait for some chemical reaction, some sparks to fly between you and God. He's saying make the choice to love God. Here's how we know that we love him. We keep his commandments. John 14. Love God. Notice, he says your heart, your soul, and your mind. Love him emotionally, love him spiritually, and love him intellectually. In other words, give every part of yourself to him. Talk about the makeup of man, body, soul, and spirit. He's saying give it all to God. As Paul would write in Romans 12 and verse 1 and 2, it is a living sacrifice. What is? Our bodies. I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. The idea of a living sacrifice was just counterintuitive to everything. Sacrifice meant death. It implied a death. But Paul says, I know what it normally means. But your body, your life, your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, everything. That's the sacrifice you give. And you give while you're alive, while it can still be utilized by God. So we must choose to love God with everything that we have. This begins to shape our hearts to see like God sees. You see, if we love God, we will draw close to God. We will obey God. He will begin to influence us. You know, they say that after a couple has been married for 40 or 50 years, that they begin to look like one another. Have you ever heard that? I think part of that is because we begin to share some of the same expressions on our faces, you know, the same looks of surprise. You know, we share a lot of things together anyway. And so we begin to look like one another. The love that joins us causes our hearts and our lives to meld together so that we resemble. Plus, you know, when you get a whole lot of wrinkles and a whole lot of gray hair, that's really all anyone sees anyway. And if you both got wrinkles and gray hair, you look the same, right? I don't know about all that, but here's what I do know. The closer we draw to God, the more we fall in love with Him, the more we love Him, the more we'll look like Him. And the more we'll see the world like Him. The more we'll act like Him. And so loving God with our whole being is going to shape how we see the world. It's going to cause us to see the world as God sees it. The second part, though, was love your neighbor as yourself, Jesus would say. If we choose to love God, then we also choose to love others. And love demands that sacrifice for them. And so, yes, I may not get to watch the whole game because I may have to get up and go talk to my neighbor. I saw that they drove in, and now's the time to go knock on the door. I've been trying to catch them for 3 weeks now, and they're at home. Yes, it's the fourth quarter, but my neighbor who is lost is at home. Well, surely they'll be home at the end of the fourth quarter, right? Maybe, maybe not. But I know they're home right now. And now might be the only time I have to ever talk to them about the gospel. You see, when we start seeing the world as lost, as we recognize where they are. Notice how Jesus, in John 4:35, he says the fields are white unto harvest. He is begging them, see this world the way I see it. There are yet 4 months unto the harvest. That's what they were tempted to say. There's just 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. And Jesus says what? Lift your eyes and see that now is the time. Maybe it's not the harvest analogy. Maybe it's Jude, verse 23, when he says, others save with fear, snatching them out of the fire. Having a heart that is shaped by love and seeing the world as God sees it, we will see that this world is already on fire. You know, we're thinking that in 2 Peter 3, in verse 10 and 11, when it says the earth is going to be burned up and all the elements in it, that's when the fire is going to come. But let me tell you that the fires of hell are already spread over the face of this earth. Others save with fear, snatching them out of the fire. They're already standing in the fire. And if we think the fire is not going to start until the end of time, then we don't see the world as God sees it. There are already people burning in their own personal hell right now, just preparing for an eternity that's going to come. And their only hope is that we recognize they're burning right now and snatch them out of the fire. We must see the world as God sees it. Evangelism is not about numbers or marking another notch on the belt. It's not just about fulfilling Christian duty or a church homework assignment. Go out and talk to one friend this week. It's not about setting your eyes on another project to conquer. It's really just about love. It is about loving your neighbor as yourself. It is a natural progression of our Christianity. Because I love them, I want them to be saved. Because I want them to be saved, I'm going to evangelize. if it's not a natural progression of our Christianity, if we're forcing ourselves to just do another project, there's something missing in our love. We need to start working on ourselves more than our neighbors. We've got to reach out in mercy, show compassion, be genuine about the fear that we have for their spiritual safety. Because the fact is, when we are motivated out of just a sense of duty, or it's just, I've gone through a course and this was my homework assignment, people are going to see that. The people we try to evangelize, they recognize that I'm just a number to you. And that will put them off. But love, a genuine love for their soul, let me tell you, that will pique interest. Why do you care about me so much? Why would you do this for me? Why would you bring me a casserole? No one in my family died. I hardly know you. But you continue to show that love, those doors will open. And you'll hear those words, I want what you have. Because they make that connection. They see what it is they've been missing. So, as I close, I want to quickly look at, we're motivated by love. Yes, love motivates us to go, but love also prompts us to develop personally. And just three quick ideas here. And the first one is that we need to be praying for a heart like Jesus. I know that my love, as I love God, that my life will be shaped more like Him, but we need to be praying for that as well. Paul would write in Philippians 2 and verse 5, have this mind in you which was also in Christ. It's not just the mind of spirituality, but it's a mind that sees the souls of mankind and how sin is destroying them and how sin has got them in its grasp and how we hold the key. We have an opportunity to change those things. And so we pray, Father, give me a heart like your Son Jesus. Father, allow my eyes to see the spiritual condition of my neighborhood, of my workplace, of my classroom, of the ball field. Father, allow my love and my compassion to be seen by those who are around me. We need to start praying for a heart like Jesus. Number two, we need to start studying the life of Jesus, specifically to learn how He related to people from all walks of life. Think about the adulterous woman in John chapter 8, to the dishonest businessman Zacchaeus in Luke chapter 19, to the scandalized Samaritan woman of John chapter 4, to the teacher of Israel in John 3, to harlots, and publicans, and Pharisees, seeing people as Jesus saw them. Look for His love and His compassion to help us emulate. Put that in our life, to emulate it in our lives. I know we've heard all these accounts before. We've studied the woman at the well of Samaria. We've looked at Jesus eating with the Pharisees and the publicans and the harlots. But let's go back and study those specifically with an eye of how did He relate and reach out to those people. Evangelism begins here with my prayer and my study, and as I make effort to see those who need Jesus. You say, well, everyone needs Jesus. Yes. Everyone includes the people on the far reaches of the globe that you may or may not ever have contact with. You may not have that opportunity with them. So we look for those that we can touch today. those that we can change their lives in this moment. We look for the lost and the outcast, the undesirables, the forgotten. We see how Jesus stopped to show compassion, how he took time with children, how he touched the lepers and the lonely, and he noticed the sick. He made room for every one of them in his life. He made room. And we often look at our lives and we say, I'm too busy. I've got too much to do. We get overloaded. And we start rattling off our schedule. We go to work. The kids are at school. Come home. Got a ball game. After the ball game, we've got to go over here and do this. And then we finally get home. We get to bed, take showers, get up in the morning and do it all again. Tomorrow, the kids practice until 5:30. And then they've got this other activity going on. And we talk about how busy we are. The fact is we, I think sometimes, purposefully overload our lives with the secular to give us an excuse not to deal with the spiritual. Jesus made room in his life for these people. And when we are too busy to make time for others, even just to notice them. I know we talk about spiritual discipline sometimes, like meditation and prayer and study. What about a new discipline? The discipline of noticing. Just making eye contact with people. And seeing them as another person, not just background scenery, but a person who needs Jesus. If we slowed down just a bit and studied the life of Jesus and asked for his heart and practiced the discipline of noticing, I think evangelism's importance and power would come through. It would shine through our lives. It's funny how we'll avoid those who are scandalized or victimized or terrified. Certain people, we don't want to get mixed up in their lives. I mean, it's messy and sticky and yucky, and we want to keep our lives neat and clean. But Jesus didn't call us to a neat and clean, comfortable life. He didn't commission us to stay safe. He commissioned us to go into the world, a world filled with messy people, with messy lives and sticky situations and ugly moments. And he said, go meet these people. Meet people with lives that, quite frankly, are as messed up as ours are sometimes. And just as unwieldy and just as ugly as ours have been and maybe still are. And show them that there is a life more abundant than they will ever know in their moments of sin and iniquity. That's what he calls us to. You shall be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in Judea and Samaria, even unto the end of the earth. But it's love that makes us see the earth. It's love that opens our minds to Judea and Samaria. It's love that gets us to see Jerusalem, Corsicana, and says, I am going to turn this world upside down. It's love for God and for our neighbor. That's how we prepare ourselves. When we do those things, when we are determined to reach out in love, the other things will fall in place. I will learn what it takes to preach the gospel. I will learn the best plan or method of my evangelism that fits me and tailors toward the people I'm reaching out to. I will learn those things because I am motivated by a deep sense of love. It's not just a sense of duty. It's love for our mankind. I appreciate your attention. I hope that you will go out and develop this kind of heart.
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are you fully trusting in His grace this hour? Are you washed in the blood